Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of CIR Realty Business Mastery. We are here with Alan Tennant, President and CEO of CREB, the Calgary Real Estate Board.
Hey, guys.
Alan, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. It's great.
And we have Alan on today because Alan is one of the most engaged people that we know. You have a background selling, which we'll talk about in a little bit here as well. Mm-hmm. But your knowledge of the industry, I think, is second to none of most people out there. And you're on the local level in Calgary here, obviously. You're also provincial level. You know a lot of the happenings on the Alberta side, and you interact a ton with CREA as well on the national level, even probably around North America in some cases. So I appreciate you bringing the knowledge and taking time to share with us today.
Wow.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay, how long have we got? I got to figure out something.
We have exactly 48 minutes, Alan.
And the expectation is very high.
Yeah, no, this will be fun.
Well, on one note, and we're going to ask you to tell us a little bit about your background, but I just want to, and if I'm saying this wrong, correct me, but my understanding is that boards all around Canada idolize might be a little bit strong, but really respect the way the Calgary Real Estate Board is run. Like, you are looked at as an example as far as governance and the way you operate within the city and realtors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. It is, which is just really cool.
I could go on and on. Yeah, now I will.
Good. I think that you should, because our realtors don't know that. I'm in some circles once in a while where I'm lucky enough to hear someone's at a meeting where that's spoken about, but I don't think our realtors really understand how widely respected their board is.
Well, and it's interesting. I will get into some of my background here, but as I got more involved in organized real estate as a volunteer, I started to learn the same thing. So this has been kind of a perception about CREB for some time. So let's face it, it's something in our culture as entrepreneurs, as
it's true.
Status quo challengers and those kinds of things. So, but it is nice to hear that. We do hear it sometimes. We are drawn on a lot. And when I say we, myself, members of the staff team, members of the directors and so on, our past chairs, presidents, get called upon quite regularly to serve on committees, to offer advice. How did you do this? That kind of thing. So it kind of is a proof point that, yeah, we are doing some interesting things. We do have a kind of a spirit around, or a culture around taking on risk. We're not crazy risk takers, but we'll analyze risk and maybe take a different approach on it than other boards and organizations. So I've always spoken of how great it is to have a board of directors that's open to new ideas, that are critical thinkers who will make great ideas even better. And that's an important part of this dynamic. So there's a lot of fingerprints on that reputation.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, and that when you talked about taking risks and that entrepreneurial spirit, you just don't be afraid to try stuff. And not all of it works.
Yeah. And
we deal with that on a brokerage level too, where you try stuff and some of it doesn't work, but some of it works really well. And you're like, oh, good thing we tried that.
Exactly.
And we're also members of, I think, 5 boards now, and no one holds a candle. Like, I don't want to get into calling out names or anything, but
you don't know what you got until you start getting other things.
Well, and that's nice to hear. And the problem with all that is you shouldn't have to belong to 5 boards. We'll get into that later.
That's question 4.
Let's start with that.
But
the whole aspect of kind of taking risk and failing fast and allowing yourself to focus more on the learning than the blaming. Again, it's a cultural way of looking at it, and the fact that, we hold people accountable. We do, grind our teeth when there's a write-off and something just is a dismal failure. But the ability to identify that and react quickly, is really important, and to do it confidently. And that's what I try to instill in our staff team, that I want to hear crazy ideas. I want to hear you say that thing you mentioned the other day, it's not going to work, and here's why, and what about this? And then there's that better idea that we need to focus on. So, and it's not like we're crazily going along. We work with a very well laid out business plan. Our board of directors articulates our strategic plan. So our approach is quite systematic. But this is something I used in my real estate career. And I remember it seemed like about once a month somebody would say, let's go for lunch. I want to figure out what you're doing. And my message was always have structure and then let the creativity flow. Because if you can rely on your structure in your day, in your calendar, in your life, in your processes, that'll allow you to kind of let it rip when there's that thing that confronts you and you think, usually I would shut this down. Conversation, this idea, this proposal, a co-listing. One of the first times I had a call about a co-listing, it was like, instead of, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know, you go fail because I'm the expert in this area. I'll just do it and run with it.
Totally.
So instead, I took a different approach and made some extra money on the side here and there.
Great work. Great work. Well, take us back and tell us about your background, because you were a realtor, one of the top producers in Airdrie, if I'm not mistaken as well. And I know you obviously did some work in Calgary too. So give us your background and then lead us up to CREB and then tell us about your role at CREB.
Sure. So, I actually graduated from SAIT, with a diploma in business administration. I majored in marketing, and I went straight out to work for the Toronto Dominion Bank. I decided banking was my entry point into the business world. It really did a lot of things for me in terms of structure and so on. Along comes my father, running a group of weekly newspapers with some big ideas about growth, and he needed a business guy, you know, and I trust you and you need to come and run the business. So after 3.5 years, and made this life decision as we were in the hospital welcoming our second born to the world, and I turned to Rona and said, I think I'm going to quit the banking and go work for Dad. And I was like, what?
So, in a time of life where you want the most stability possible, it's like, we're just going to throw it off.
Yeah, exactly. You know what?
Anything else you want to bring up right now in labor and delivery?
Yeah, and so I can hit you over the head. Actually, sorry, that was with the birth of Michelle, our first, and who was a realtor. And it was one of those moments where I just realized I really wanted to get into the real aspect of running a business and not the other side of it with banking. So threw myself at it, and Dad really did need a business guy. But after a while, I realized that the family dynamic was not ideal. So moved into the real estate realm at that point, and I focused on getting involved in organized real estate in CREB, because the light went on that my business was in Airdrie, and I wanted to get to know other realtors. But I also wanted them to get to know me, because they might send me that referral and say, I'm not driving out to Airdrie. Totally. You find them a house. So, but along the way, I became a broker, and quickly realized I should not be a broker. So again, you have to be honest about what you're good at and what you enjoy. And so I ran the brokerage for about 3.5 years, and eventually had lunch with our banker, and he said, so why are you doing this? And I said, ego. Like, it just hit me, and I had to be honest with myself that I was probably in this position for the wrong reasons, and I didn't really need that validation. And what was needed to take the company to the next level wasn't for me. The fellow I sold it to, Rick Campus, was more visionary and brought in a bunch of people. And it was interesting how it evolved. And at any rate, long story short, I guess, getting longer, 26.5 years a realtor, loved every minute of it, really enjoyed it. Along the way, was privileged to be CREB's president, I think in 1998. Had the opportunity to serve at the next level. I was not interested in being involved in an area. And the tradition then was that the past president of CREB was always appointed to the area board. So there was this obvious hiccup that kind of emerged.
You're like, I'm not going.
I'll pass. So I ended up serving on the CREB board, serving as president in 2006. And along the way, got to know a lot of really, really good executive officers, and a few bad ones. Anyway, I learned from that. I didn't ever see myself as a closet executive officer, because some people do. And they kind of, have this ulterior motive to, eventually get the job. I didn't, but I watched what was happening around Ron Esch's impending retirement and thought, what's going to happen? Where's this going? I was really concerned. I was a member that had a lot of questions about different things, as many people do present today. Yeah. And that's great. And I always encourage that. And there I was watching Ron's retirement and this trend that they were getting people from the outside. They didn't have to be from the real estate community to run a real estate board, which I get. And I've got some colleagues that have that background, and they're fabulous at what they do. But on the other hand, it just bothered me, because I was very concerned that we were at a fragile point where things could go horribly wrong. So I had a few people encourage me to go for the job. And Ron had sort of projected fairly far out that he was leaving. So there was some time, and I started looking at some training. I got 2 of the designations done before my interview, and I kept it all secret. Yeah. In fact, they ask you, why are you taking the course and who's it on behalf of? And I put CREB, which is the International Consortium of Real Estate Associations. So I kind of play a little bullshit game. But I needed a cover story because I didn't want to pressure the hiring committee.
Right.
I was here and
Right.
I'm getting ready and all that stuff. So I kind of created this cover story that I was doing it on behalf of ICREA to understand governance better and how to run an organization, because
I like it. Yeah.
at the time, we were leaders in the world in trying to establish the right way to set up organized real estate in Saudi Arabia and China and all kinds of places. So, but the decision was made that I would go for it. And if I'm going for something, I go hard. So, I kept it very quiet. I made a point of not discussing it. There was rumors kind of swirling. There was chatter, you should, or this should happen or whatever. It was nice to hear, but I knew I had to get there on my own merits. And in these processes, job one's to get the interview and then get there and deliver. So anyway, it was,
what year did you start?
So
were you elected?
So this was, yeah, I was hired in, the end of 2011.
2011.
Yeah, so 8 years ago.
It's been that long?
Wow.
Just past my anniversary.
Oh my
You've
gosh.
been doing that for this for 8 years.
Yeah, and it's time to go. I say that, but it is.
This is Alan's last interview.
Yeah.
It's a very special show.
Well, I think it's important though that, you know, if you look at best practices around people in this role, and I'm not talking about organized real estate, but the CEO of any organization, there's a lot of literature that explains that, you know, an 8 to 10 year term is about the max, because there is a settling in that starts to happen. And I've seen it. And when they hired me, I said, I won't be replacing Ron for another 15, 20 years. I'm just not wired for that. And I've talked about that openly with the board.
Yeah.
I talk about my career plan and where I'm at with what's going on and so on. And it's just the reality that for the organization, that renewal that comes with a new staff leader is important. So, I'm respecting that, but also giving the organization lots of time to think about it. So we do succession planning.
That's
we do all
smart.
kinds of things. Things are changing around us. So
Yeah.
who knows what the future really holds, but, you know, I think it's
Interesting you
important.
say that, not to talk myself out of a job, but I've been with CIR for 10 years this year in my role. And our our lead graphic artist, Corinne Scott, has been here for 9 years. And we were sitting in her office working on something yesterday. And we were listening to two newer staff members have a conversation about something. And and one of them was on the phone with a realtor and someone also sitting beside having a conversation. And the way they were explaining things and their upbeatness. And I said to Corinne, I'm like, isn't it nice to listen to new people talk? Right? Because there's something. There is something. I mean,
So
it doesn't
true.
mean that, you know, everyone who's older needs to go, but bringing in new blood, you feel it.
Yeah.
In general, regardless of what position it is,
Yeah.
there's a nice
Yeah.
to that.
Well, and I
get
think
it.
that's a key part of leadership is
Yeah.
to not even start for a minute to think, how can I turn this into a 30-year gig or whatever? You know, I mean, that's not the point. So, so that's why there's this check-in every year with the board of directors on my career plan. It's actually a part of the process where I talk about what my aspirations
That's
are.
smart.
And is
I
there
like
still
that.
a fit with my current role? So, yeah.
Let's pivot for a second now. Let's go to, because I love the depth of your experience where it comes from. You've been in the trenches. You've been in tough markets. You've been on the leadership side. You've seen, more than I even thought in terms of your experience with CREA and working on Realtor Link and pieces like that. So fast forward to today, and you've been in now 8 years. What issues are you seeing realtors face in not necessarily today's market, but the business atmosphere, the environment that's around stuff like that? What are the hot issues for realtors right now, in your opinion?
Survival.
Yeah.
Starts there. Yeah. This is the worst market I've ever seen. I mean, 35-ish years around the business, even if I count a little time being a weekly newspaper salesperson going around going, how about a full page this week? And it's like, yeah, have you seen what's going on out there?
Yeah.
You know, we've got all these listings, nothing selling. So, first of all, everybody needs to congratulate themselves that they're here. Let's not presume anything. And it's something we talk about at our staff. You know, I often tease my colleagues who come from outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's like come from away. The ones that come from outside, and I say to them, I'm going to help you speak realtor, because some of them just don't get it. And they'll say, how am I doing? Am I bilingual? No.
Yeah.
Not even close. But part of it is understanding that realtors make the conscious decision to take a risk, to start a career where there's really no guarantees, you know, and there's all that vanilla stuff about, well, the day you start, every listing out there is yours. You can go sell it and all that kind of stuff. Yes, but you still have to create a business, and you have to think about what that business looks like. And is it going to be what you want? Is it going to be sustainable? Is it going to keep you interested? So for 26 years, I was interested, but my business changed a lot. And I came off a stage doing a presentation in London, Ontario, and was quickly, trying to keep a deal together. And I thought, I need a partner. I can't be the Lone Ranger anymore. So on the flight home, I turned to John Fraser from Okotoks, who was also on the CREB board at the time, and said, I need to get a partner. And he goes, oh, who are you thinking of? And I said, Frank Shreenan. And wonderful man.
Yeah.
I just blurted it out.
Yeah.
So he said, oh, have you talked to him? I go, no. It just occurred to me. So it was one of those challenges where I had to adjust my business to serve a certain thing, which is fine. But in the end, it really changed my approach. And I ended up with a team of 5, and we traded off. We had a showing phone. Kind of low-tech solution. But it was like,
brilliant.
Sometimes those are the easiest solutions.
Here you go, Kirsten. It's Friday at noon and I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything you are.
Nice.
And next weekend I will. And we pass it around the team.
Perfect.
It's one of those geez, you get a cheap phone and what the hell?
Yeah.
And
Why not?
that's the number that went in the system. Anyway, it was little things like that really impacted our work-life balance. And it occurred to me the year I was CREB President, I traveled. The year I was CREB President, I actually was invited to a brokerage shortly after. So tell us about your year. And I said, well, I was away 75 days. And wow, that's a lot. I go, yeah, and I'm not giving it back. Now it's my time. I'm going to find a way to build that much downtime into my business because you need to stay fresh.
Yeah.
You work every day.
Yeah.
It shows, and you have to find a way to keep fresh. So,
and today's in the market today too, you were mentioning just from a survival perspective, it's probably very tough for how much realtors are putting in day after day after day, and the output and the results that they're seeing aren't necessarily as exciting as they are when they're doing a lot of work and things are selling and buyers are coming to the table as well. So just that pressure of doing. I bet that's tough right now.
Well, it is. And it's a funny thing, but we get caught up in the boom bust mentality and everybody wants to fight it. One of the buzzwords that's floating around out now, the phrase that we're always hearing about is economic recovery and the economic downturn and all this kind of stuff. This is what it is. This is not a horrible market. People are buying and selling real estate. I remember in my darkest days, and it was funny, but I keep coming back to Frank, but there was a conversation him and I had at the copier. I mean, it wasn't the 200-foot copier like yours that you just showed me, but holy shit. Yeah. These guys have good equipment for you guys. But, how you doing? Frank says. And I said, well, not worth a shit. I haven't sold a house in like 4 months. He goes, really? I've been like 3 months. Like, what the hell? Yeah. And anyway, later he came up to me and said, I really appreciate being so honest because I beat my head against the wall. Yeah. I said, hey, we've both done a lot of business. This isn't going to last forever.
Totally.
But, that's my message is first of all, recognizing that you chose a hard profession and you're good enough at it that you're still here. Mm-hmm. I get that you're not happy with what's going on, but the reality is every business out there is doing more for less, and that's the problem.
Every business. It's so
and that's
true.
What I go out of my way to be exposed to right now is what's happening out there. And I'm not talking oil patch. I'm talking everything. So what the focus needs to be on is how you find your niche in that market and how you create, a business that will satisfy the profit motive, because everybody's in this to bring home a living. That's right. This business that you guys run here so well, has to generate a profit. We need to allow brokers, to be profitable. We need to, have an environment where, the profit motive isn't a bad thing. So realtors get paid. They get paid a lot. They don't get paid a lot every day.
No, that's right.
So if that was the model, everybody would do it. It's not. So people come and go because they can't make a sustainable career out of it. So the bigger challenge right now is taking all the negative noise that's out there and think hard about what's really going on. And I heard an interesting stat yesterday. I'm on a City of Calgary finance task force trying to figure out this big problem the city has with residential versus non-residential taxes and so on. Yeah. It's fascinating, mind-blowing in some ways. But one of the stats we heard was, first of all, did you know half of the tax revenue that's collected on your annual property taxes goes to the province? And I'm not saying that in a negative accusatory
I didn't
way.
know that.
Oh yeah.
But the city is very efficient, and the towns and villages around the province, collection mechanism for the province, as it should be, because if you think about it, it's probably the simplest way to do it.
Totally.
However, that's one of the realities, and we see that number that we pay for our taxes, and geez, they're pissing it away. Well, the reality is, half of it is what we need to focus on. But when you look at the downtown vacancy, and I get this question a lot when I'm traveling or even on a conference call, hey, how's it going? You guys still got a third of the office space downtown vacant? I say, well, Ron and I live downtown. Is it less busy? Yeah and no, but yeah, there's some buildings that probably shouldn't have got built.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
We are overbuilt, but the reality, and the stat I heard yesterday confirmed it, is that we have almost the same occupied office space downtown per capita as most major markets in Canada.
Really?
Oh.
So we run around beating ourselves up and saying, well, it went from 32% vacancy to 26%. And oh, why? That's a bunch. Well, it's not. It's because they're giving it away.
Yeah.
That's why it filled up. But the reality is there's a rebound happening. So that's where I think we need to change our language and our thinking around our economic challenges and the fact that this is a market where people buy and sell homes typically because of a need, not so much because they want to make money and they're trying to time the bottom of the market or the top of the market. We overthink that.
Yeah.
The market is the market. So when somebody says, hey, come and sell my house or come and help me find something, yeah, there will be that point where they want to be making that smart economic judgment.
Yeah.
And you're going to come back, and I know you guys do this, with that great quote from Anne-Marie Lurie saying, but did you know, and this, and this, and helps them piece together a decision. At the end of it all, what are they telling their family? We found the house.
Absolutely.
That's gold.
We just walked in an open house, like Buena Vista, and bought it, like just literally off the cuff.
No plans.
So we had a plan, but the plan was like a year and a half or 5 years, and so we ended up buying it.
Open houses work.
Had been on the market for about 8 days. We bought it, and then we listed our property, and 2 days, 2 offers, sold it. And
it was priced correctly.
Yeah, well, and we spent 2 weeks staging it and painting and everything else like that.
Stuff. Yeah,
but it's like we took care to set it apart from everything else that was out there, and it happened. But the point of that was that the buyers, the sellers on the side that we bought, it didn't take long. We were active buyers in the market, and on our side, we had 9 groups through on one day in an open house, 10 groups the next day, whatever it was, and it's like, so people were out there, and this is December. This is like
last
December.
Weekend.
Our deal went firm 2 days ago, and so it's like this is happening. So to tell me that nothing's happening out there is not true. And the inquiries that we had on our property, so we see it. But one more comment when we talk about 10-year averages. Well, let's think about, and even 10-year averages going back to 2006, 2007. Well, that just blew away 10-year averages for the next 10 years because you put boom cycles like that when you talk about per capita stuff. And I remember I was laughing talking to my cousins who lived in Winnipeg, and I was like, yeah, I made like 30 grand this month and stuff like that. And just Calgary and the Ralph Bucks, they're handing out money and stuff like that. It's like, people are just handing Albertans money. And it's like, that's not normal. And then, so that comes to 10 years, and everyone's like, oh, well, we're well below the 10-year averages. And I'm just like, let's think about what that average was. Yeah. So to your point, it's like, let's get some realistic perspective on this. We're not order takers. We have to be able to provide, meaningful services and guide people through it. And yes, you gotta look a little bit harder, turn over a couple more stones to find the next transaction.
Well, one thing that always makes me proud about realtors, excuse me, and we hear this a fair bit, I hear it a fair bit, is that they give consumers advice not to move on a deal.
Yeah.
And I remember doing that in my career, and it was instinct. It was like, you know what, guys, your take on the market, your take on the net you're going to get and everything else. I think you're right. I think the best thing to do is not put a sign on the lawn, or not buy right now, or even in the middle of the process, you realize there's a dynamic going on that's not healthy. That's the reality. That's the trust position that realtors are in. It's so special. And we can't forget that. And this is an environment where there are people that want to find the scapegoat. I had somebody tell me the other day they had, a deal fall through, and, well, I've already been yelled at this morning. And it's like, okay, I get it. Nobody likes getting yelled at. But the reality is that consumer really needs this to happen. And who better than one of our members to help them get there? And the fact that it's so challenging and it's so hard is what separates everybody from the order takers.
Right.
And the people that show up when the gravy train's running. But what we saw in the last real upcycle is that was a really tough market to make a buck too. And I came across people that said, I can't figure it out. There's deals flying all around me and I can't land one of them. Like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Or you get a bunch of competing offers, and we have like, people were talking about, I had 10 unaccepted offers.
Yeah.
That came in just because we're competing on different stuff. Like, it was insanity, some of the stuff that happens.
Yeah.
And then people say, well, there's no inventory. And it's just like, we hear people talking Victoria and other places. It's like, no one's ever happy.
Yeah.
No one's ever happy. Where's that sweet spot?
No one's ever happy.
Exactly. But some of these other markets hardly ever change too. I mean, Winnipeg's a good example. It's a flat line.
Yeah.
If you look back over, decades.
Yeah,
So
Ottawa's like that. It's just,
there's very little movement. And I think we've gotten accustomed to the fact that there's going to be all these swings. And I think what we have right now is, first of all, normal. This is our new normal.
Yeah.
And it's not going to change very much.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is sad, and my educational background is in public relations, and you look at media trends and, what the media is hoping will happen. And it's a bad news story because nobody shares and comments and tunes in at 6 p.m. when something good happens, unless like it's really, 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 really good. Like oil's at like $120 a barrel, instantly good.
Yeah.
And you can just tell that there's so much negativity being reported on. And then the thing that I hate the most, and I hope for all of you doing this, that you stop, is that we have realtors who share this. Just like the negativity on their Facebook page or their Instagram, and it's just this perpetual, here all of the, and I don't know if it's from a political standpoint where it's just, that's kind of where you're blaming it. But there's, like, to your point, at the end of the day, people want to find a house that they're happy to live in, and they want a good situation for their family.
Yeah.
And if we can start telling more stories around home ownership and the value of home ownership and what it means for your life to be in a place that you feel good in, that your family feels good in, instead of blaming these outside factors on all of these things that really don't have that much to do with your day to day. And there's 5,000 of us, just in Calgary. Like, that's a lot of people that if everyone collectively started telling a little bit of a different story to the 100 people that they know, that's 500,000 people hearing some pretty positive stories.
Well, being able to back it up as well. I mean, that's the point. I mean, it's human nature to jump on the negative part of things. But this is, excuse me, this is just plain old piling on.
Yeah.
And it's an easy story to tell that, this bad thing happened. And I've seen those posts on Facebook too. And I think life would be better without Facebook, to be really blunt about it. I mean, because it's a different dynamic that feeds into the the negative part of our psyche. So we have to figure out how to tell the story, the positive story, without it looking like that's all we care about because we just want people to buy.
Of course.
And I think that's the balance. And I picked that up on what you were saying, but only realtors can tell that story. The economists won't.
Yeah.
Only realtors can tell that story, for sure.
5 out of 3 economists predicted the last recession incorrectly.
So true. So true.
So
yeah.
It happens all the time. It's an old line, but it's so true. And Anne-Marie Lurie is brilliant at what she does.
Yeah.
And she cringes sometimes when I try to shape, our monthly press release or whatever. I always lose that argument, by the way.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're trying. But the idea is that we have to have credibility. And I think that's the point. So sure, present the reality, the flip side of everything, but don't lead with it. I don't think that's necessary.
You know what an interesting tool is, to your point about facts? So Steve Phillips, our broker, has been, weeks and weeks, and this is kind of just coming to fruition, but he has one of our admin staff curating all of the showing time data just for our brokerage in all of the different price points, week over week. So in any given week, how many properties have been shown in this price point, this price point, this price point, and it's numbers and it's facts. And the amount of people going to view properties just within our brokerage, like, you look at these numbers and it's crazy. Yeah. And that's a fact for people to be like, these homes aren't selling. Well, did you know that, 450 people between 700 and 800 just last are actually going around looking at these properties? Like
the second week of
like
December.
just to say no one's doing this. Like, well, we have some pretty hard facts to show that there is some interest in that. Like, it's not all doom and gloom, but you have to back it up with some facts.
Well, and that's brilliant. I mean, the data matters, and especially when you tell a story that's not being told.
Yeah.
Because now you have people's interest.
That's
right.
So, and realtors are great storytellers.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure.
let's switch gears again. From the board's perspective now, and we'll combine these because, you guys have committees, you have work that the board itself is doing, you have work that your administration is doing as well. And what are the key issues? What are the topics? What are realtor, or what do you guys
locally, provincially, nationally? Yeah, kind of just in general, like just how it's package it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I mean, I brought up web forms earlier, and Korea is going through a change there, and it's a hard dynamic. And again, if you're a web forms user, and it seems like our members are more focused on repre. But
I just did it 2 weeks. I just did it last week.
Yeah,
just on the new web forms. I'm like, oh no, I actually had to, because I listed our own house, and I was like, oh my gosh, this has all changed. So it got through it though.
Yeah, well, and there's really good training, and I think that's the important thing. And we found that a few years ago when we did the transition to Matrix, and it was highlighted again when we did the Keybox transition to Central Lock, because it looked similar. It felt like I could figure it out. No, this is a really important business tool. So let us train you and learn it. So right now with web forms, that's my strong message, is to avail yourself of the training there. I'm on Korea's governance and bylaw committee. I feel a bit typecast, but anyway, and they struck a task force looking at Korea's voting structure. So on the national side, there's a continuing challenge around the voting structure of our national body, and it's all federations. That's really what Korea is. It's a federation of organizations. All federations are challenged by finding that right mix of direct user input and local and regional boards and all that kind of stuff. And it's been a problem for many years that's never really been solved. The voting structure I'm referring to. And what we're dealing with right now is one board, CREB, actually has more than half the votes. So just by size, sheer size.
Yeah.
And how the model works is boards get one vote per 500 members. That's a good month for CREB. Not a great month, more like a typical month. Yeah. They get 500 new members a month.
Wow.
So the voting structure is changing in a crazy way. And with the amalgamations that have been happening in Saskatchewan and Quebec, again, there's a consolidation of voting power. And power is probably not the right word to use because it doesn't feel like there's much power there, but it's a challenge. So again, Korea's goal is to have kind of a broad, countrywide, representation in decision making and influence. So, that's a noble principle to go after, but it's hard to make work. So we're digging in.
Can I ask a super rookie question? You can tell I'm not involved in any of this. So when we were to think of what is interesting to the agents watching about that, just because for them, they're like Korea voting, whatever, like whatever.
Yeah.
But for something like influence on the way the new mortgage rules went into play, something like balance of BC speaking and Alberta speaking, the boards involved in Korea, and influence and voting. I'm assuming if everything is coming from Ontario, where the problem, or Vancouver, where the problem is totally different, having equal representation when you're talking to the government or Korea's position, that probably all matters, that there's equal weight in issues like that, because otherwise we get affected because our voice and how that affects our market is so tiny.
Yeah.
Would that be a correct assumption?
That's a great bridge. Yeah. And I appreciate you sort of bringing it back, because I get caught up in this stuff like everybody cares. Cold water splash. but that's the goal here, is for that decision-making dynamic to be better, because the changes around the realtor code, has been some changes proposed. So, the code of ethics matters to every member on the street. But how does it matter, and what's happening? Why does the change matter to us? But advocacy around things like the stress test and what happened, what didn't happen, the whys around that, that's the group that looks at that. So again, do we want just the CREB perspective? Of course not. Even CREB knows that's not optimal.
Of course.
Most of them. But that's the balancing act that we have to figure out. So Korea's focused on some very big issues right now, and we're very fortunate to have Cliff Stevenson on the Korea board of directors.
He's fabulous.
In a leadership position. So he's vice president. I can tell you it's virtually unheard of for somebody in their second year of their first term to become vice president of Korea. That's amazing. So,
and we're very lucky in Alberta to have somebody in Alberta and in the West and in our marketplace, for us to be, not everyone's going to benefit for that, but fortunately for us to have Cliff coming from Calgary, representing our voice there with his perspective, that's great for us.
Well, exactly. And the fact that he sort of took on a leadership role so quickly speaks to his abilities, but it is good for us because now our sensibilities, our sensitivities, our concerns are on his mind too. So,
nice.
Which is great.
That's important. And now just sort of bridging into what's happening provincially, I talked about amalgamations in Saskatchewan and Quebec, and it's been interesting how those have evolved, and they both kind of came to a head quickly. And in Quebec, it was a different dynamic where it really was just over a few months that all the boards there got together and formed a new provincial body, and that was it. They took away their board levels, so they have one membership in organized real estate in the province. Of course, it still belonged to CREA, but one membership in the province. So Saskatchewan went through a very similar thing. The last version of it didn't take that long. I'm going to say 2 years, but it was after 20 years of failed attempts.
Interesting. Interesting.
So they worked through it and got there. So for us, when I said earlier, I would have said, I did say no thanks to area. Honestly, if I was asked today, I'd say hell yeah. There's a lot of really good things happening there. They are leading edge in terms of, and they meaning us, because we were part of the governance change, but it's the only provincial association in the country that's an appointed board. And that's the way it should go. So you want best person philosophy as a catchphrase, but you really break it down. What you want is the best people in that role for the right reasons. So, and the analogy is if we were going to form, an all-star hockey team right now, are you going to say, great, I need a kid from every community to play on this team?
Absolutely not.
No, I want the 8 best boys or girls to be on the team. And I don't care if they all live in the same street or come out of the same house. Now, is that a problem in the federation environment? Well, of course, that kind of goes against what I was just describing. Yeah. Is it a problem provincially? Well, it can be. So there is actually some regions that identify that, but we're in with 2 other boards now, where before, we had 3 votes at one time, 3 directors on the area board of directors, which was dysfunctional and it didn't work. So there's been a lot of really great dynamic change there. We're in the midst of, the Real Estate Act review right now, like up to our eyeballs in it, and it's coming at us fast. It's one of these slow moving trains where you can see it and like, holy shit, it's really moving.
Yeah.
So, Brad Mitchell and Heather Coleman over at Area have done a fantastic job in opening it up. So it's a collaborative environment, but there's a point in there where they have to say, no, we've got intel or we've got contacts that have said we can do this, but we can't do that. So that's where the strategizing has to be based on good hard data, relationships. Boy, it sounds like a real estate situation, but it's very similar. So the Real Estate Act, review is partially focused on improving RECA's governance. That dumpster fire has created a lot of problems for us, and I wrote a CREB chat article about it, saying, "Look, this isn't about you guys. It's nothing you need to apologize for. Realtors didn't create this. Realtors respect self-regulation. Yeah, they do self-regulate. Yeah, I've told this story many times. I've told it to the government. If I went out and got 5 realtors and sat them down and said, this just happened, what do you think? First of all, they'd be appalled, probably, depending on what the situation. And it almost doesn't matter what it is. Leaving a back door unlocked, that's ridiculous. Take away their license. But that's the part too that I always explain. Yeah. And what they want is they want stronger penalties. They want more protections for their brand because it really matters to them. And that's a dynamic that we really are sort of carrying into this work. So RECA Council was removed from office, which was a bit of a black eye. On the surface, it looks like we lost self-regulation, but the reality is we never really had self-regulation the way we all think that works. It was essentially a model of co-regulation. Right. And does that really even matter? Well, it does to the government, because the government's principal concern is protecting the interests of Joe and Mary Six-Pack. That's what Ralph Klein used to call it. Yeah. And so the average Albertan on the street needs their government to protect them. Totally. So it's not a shot at realtors. It's just, this is what we need. And they are charged with the responsibility of balancing that against the needs of the industry. So not all industries are regulated, but those that have a position of trust, have access to consumers in vulnerable times, or, there's a whole list of criteria. But everybody knows I'm describing realtors now more than anything. So we need to embrace regulation. We need it to work way better. The dysfunction around what was going on the last many, many years, not the last 3-4 years, which some people try to portray this as a recent problem, but for many years, there's been frustrations around how things worked and an adversarial relationship. And I was a part of that. I wrote 20-page sonograms, that, made our case. And, it would always start with a 3-line email responded by, a 20, paragraph email followed up by a strong letter. And, so they would escalate in a ridiculous fashion. And to what end? Honestly, we need to move past that. So, the collaborative work, the importance of speaking with one voice to government is critical. So that's what we're really focused on right now with our provincial colleagues and with area. And again, sometimes it is just, you've been there, you've been at broker summits where we've talked about challenging issues, and you've been very open, Lindsay, expressing your concerns.
Yep.
And area listens. And they're trying to change their approach as well. But the reality is real estate boards have an advantage because of our proximity to the members.
That's right. And
the fact that we're providing services that they need, like walking through your office and having the tour, and it's a fantastic building, facility. Any one of those agents could have said, by the way, what about this or what about that? Now, if Brad Mitchell was walking through, there'd be only a handful of things because that's the way it works.
Right.
So the reality is that our proximity gives us a little better sense of what works and what doesn't work in terms of engagement. But it doesn't mean necessarily that, their work is easy and we should go do their work in Edmonton in terms of advocacy and so on. So, we've started talking very openly about our board's desire for CREB members to have one Alberta membership.
Yeah,
so,
that's perfect. That's my next question. So tell us about that.
So again, we look at what happened in Quebec. We looked at what happened in Saskatchewan. And when I say look at, we analyzed it. We flew them in from Saskatchewan to talk to us about it. And we invited, our colleagues from other boards, the leaders of the other boards in area, to a meeting on May 15th this past spring, and said, we're inviting the folks from Saskatchewan. We just want to pick their brain for the day. We're paying for it. You're welcome. Well, there was some grumbling and bitching, and Chair Sarah Johnston was brilliant in managing this. Excuse me, it was not easy to get all the people in the room, and there was some that weren't there, and then to get them to participate fully. But we had a very good day, and really kind of created that threshold for better change to come, basically. And I really believe that when the KPMG report landed in July, our provincial real estate community was in a better position to react than we might have been before, because we were quite fragmented. I mean, the 3-way agreement voting had happened where it enables boards to have direct membership in CREA, bypassing the Provincial Association. Us in Edmonton were parties to that. We championed it, we were in the room when the idea was hatched, and we brought Edmonton in later. I love pointing that out. Actually, Vancouver brought them in, and we said, "Well, okay." Now I'm really inside baseball here, but
that's awesome.
You guys are pulling this out of me.
Yeah, I like it.
But we found a dynamic where, for our organization, we realized our focus needs to be on one Alberta membership. I wrote a discussion paper my first full year on the job, like almost on my 1-year anniversary, that talked about flattening all of the organizations in the province into one, getting rid of the boards, getting rid of area, creating new org, calling it something new. Basically, it's what happened in Saskatchewan. But I kind of held my breath and sort of gave it to Bob Jablonski, who was president, and said, you might want me to clean up my desk after this, but I'm basically advocating to get rid of me. You don't need all this infrastructure. And I made the comment then that there was $30 million roughly collected from Alberta realtors to run 2 levels of organized real estate.
Right.
I bet we could take that $30 million and do something really frickin' amazing.
Yeah.
And I got challenged and argued at and everything else, and the numbers weren't right and whatever. And I said, well, what are they then?
Yeah.
Let's figure it out. Here's our financials, and it was like, other reasons. We're not going to talk about it. So we have a new leadership group at area that's more receptive to this kind of thing, but they're balancing the fact that they've got 10-member boards.
Of course.
And, our idea may not be the idea for everybody, but what we're thinking about and proposing now is something that does maintain the status quo for boards that don't want to become one, and they like paying 2 sets of dues, whatever.
Yeah. That's
Ultimately, it's up to you guys.
When do you think it's all going to pan out?
I think hopefully sometime in the next year or so, we'll start to see something formulate into a strong idea. The amalgamation fever around organized real estate is everywhere around North America.
Yeah.
It is. It's just not unique to us.
No, it's not. And NAR, the National Association of Realtors in the U.S., has been extremely aggressive. I'd say going back the last 5-6 years, where they have targets for the number of boards they want amalgamated. That they'll specifically set out goals, and they'll go to whatever lengths to convince organizations to merge up. And they have minimum board standards that are far more strenuous than what we have in Canada. And CREB's been one of the boards advocating for stronger. We advocated for, and this sounds minor, but it really matters, for the board president to sign their annual compliance report. And it's a big report. And there's been a lot of bitching about, well, there's so much detail here. Well, no, you have to sign the report, and your chair has to sign it. Your president has to sign their name that it's in compliance, because there's this bullshit. Yeah, we comply. So
interesting.
It's not good enough anymore.
So back to the Alberta market here for a second. Using your crystal ball, what should we expect for 2020?
Stability. Let's look at it in a positive way.
Yeah.
This is going to be a stable environment. I refer to it as the new normal. Like that's a new catchphrase. But it is. This is more of a normal environment. And when you look back at Alberta's history, we get distracted by this stuff, but it actually, the trend line is more balanced and flat. So, we're going to see some good news here and there. We're going to see a little bit of bad news, I'm sure, but having a calendar year where you have a provincial and a federal election is a recipe for disaster. And you factor in all the other crazy stuff going on in the U.S., with Brexit. I mean, there's a lot of negativity in the air and
impeachment talks or we'll see what the Senate does. I mean, it's all that stuff's interesting.
Exactly. And it's the old problem. Bank of Canada, gets an idea in their head and it affects everybody, and suddenly, consumer debt is a glowing concern. Well, is it really? And maybe that's what saved us in the last, tanking that happened globally, with the financial sector. But on the other hand, these constraints, especially around the stress test, created undue stress on our markets that didn't need to happen. So we've delivered that message. Anne-Marie Lurie and I were invited to a meeting with Stephen Pelosi, the Bank of Canada governor, last November, and we got into it. And he's a feisty guy.
Yeah. That's fabulous that you and Anne-Marie were able to do that, though. That's great.
And he came at me a little bit, sort of challenging me on some stuff, because I challenged him, and it was great. And I read before and I read since. He kind of likes that, but I had his second in command come over after and say, "You were right to push back. Anne-Marie, and your reporting is balanced. You guys are not coming up with this rose-colored glasses." This was trying to portray approach to things. And we have a lot of respect for her work. And I said, "Good, tell your boss."
That's cool.
So he knows. Yeah. So it was one of those casual conversations. So
do you think you see anything changing on that anytime in the next 2 to 3 years as far as Alberta is concerned? Or variations to the provinces where that's going to be still a mandate?
I think so. I mean, the stress test can be indexed. The government tried to stake out that, Pelosi said that's bad economic policy. And the government said, well, we don't do that kind of thing. Well, you do with employment insurance. It's in fact double indexed. So you might want to think hard before you start pushing things away, because it won't work. This will work. The government very aggressively brought in a new national housing strategy. They've tasked CMHC, which honestly, I don't know if that's a great idea or not. I don't know if they're equipped or even deserve the work. I'll say it. If you follow the CMHC CEO on Twitter, you'll know why I'm saying this. But
I gotta like that. Twitter follower. Yeah.
Jump in there. Yeah. Anyway, there's some things happening in and around, fiscal policy, economic policy, and so on that are challenging. We focus on that stuff and we think hard about it, but we can't get hung up on all the potential things that might happen. So all these things lined up to create, I think an even worse environment this last year. And here we are. So now we're looking forward. Do we have some, crazy delusional view of what's going to happen? No, there's going to be more challenges come at us that we don't even see coming. Dwayne Monia is the new interim administrator of RECA. He's a straight shooter. I've spent a delightful amount of time just having good quality conversation with the guy. And he turned to me one time and he said, "What's the biggest thing that's keeping you awake at night?" And I said, "Our members aren't making enough money."
Yeah.
He said, really? I said,
Well stated.
yeah. I said, that's what this is about.
Yeah.
We're an organization that helps them do well. And if they're not doing well, that's something I need to think about. So is it my job to put a buyer in front of them? No, but I can create an environment where they aren't getting pushed away, and they don't have regulatory constraints that are making them crazy, and bullshit rules like the advertising stuff that was shoved at us. And it didn't matter how we argued it. It was turning into another exchange of 20-page letters. So we did it, but it's not the best way to do things. So at any rate, I have great optimism for the coming year and the next couple of years. But this is a time to really be introspective. I used to always do my business plan in December before it was a phrase. I did them for years. I would do it, before the end of the year. I would sit and write my goals. I would sit and make my plan. Mostly it was a glorified marketing plan. But I would detail everything and I would write it out. And again, going back to that theory about to do the structure, and then I can be creative and suddenly decide, I'm going to work with the builder. It feels like, squirrel. Yeah. But I was working with the builder with an open mind, and decided not long after not to work with a builder, but
fair.
80% of my time, 30% of my income.
Yeah.
This is a problem you need to solve, builder. And he goes, no, I'm not solving that. I go, well, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing you have to look at with your business, because the real estate career is exciting and it's full of opportunity, but you have to really figure out honestly what you're best at, and then just build everything around that. And if it feels like it's small to start with, look at how you can make it scalable later, but you can't start out here.
Yeah.
No business does that. And no business introduces new business tools and says, you'll figure it out. You're smart. It looks like the other one. So don't let yourself do that. Like take every business tool in your downtime and get expert at it. So you can quickly do that work that you need on the fly. And when you do it in a seamless way and the consumer gets what they want, that's a win.
Alan, outstanding. Thank you so much for giving us an insight into your world, which I can tell there was a lot of, like I said, we'll have to do the beer thing. I'd love to dig a little deeper into a few of these things. So
anytime.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to ask you one question that was omitted from this is Alan expressed some concern with Sarah Johnson as the chair, and we wanted to dig a little bit deeper. Just kidding.
Just on
spill water.
1 to 10.
So Sarah's awesome. We love her. We're grateful for the leadership that she provided as well to the members and your leadership as well. And I got to tell you, if you decide that in 2 years' time or whatever happens to be that there's a new life opportunity for you, we are extraordinarily grateful for your service. I've been around in organized, on the broker leadership side, before 2011, and I've seen both sides interacting with CREB. And I got to tell you, we love you guys. We think you guys are doing an awesome job. So thank you.
I've got a fantastic team. They're trying their best. I'm very fortunate to work with the board of directors I've worked with the last 8+ years. And Chair Sarah is amazing. She's a force of nature. And this is the first time in our history we're having a chair except for probably, 72 years ago, where they couldn't find somebody to be president. But Sarah's a 2-year chair. And what's really exciting about that is right now her and I are mid-stride. And we really talk openly and work on our leadership partnership. But having her, accelerating into her second year right now and doing some amazing things and sharing her leadership with her board and creating it as more of a board leadership dynamic, it's leading edge stuff and it's really fantastic. And anyway, so no concerns about Sarah.
Awesome.
I have a few concerns about Sarah. Just kidding. I love you.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Alan. If you guys want to come back to this at a later date, this will be posted up on our video library and as well as on any podcast major download player, Apple, iTunes. I'm not going to name any other ones because I'm an Apple user, but if you're not an Apple user, you know where to find this podcast. CREB Realty Business Mastery. And that's that. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And we hope you have a really good week.
Have a good week. Thanks.